Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third round of Vidit Candidates 2024. I am Nitzan Steinberg, Grandmaster, here with you. And this day we will do a recap of this round. I think it will be very exciting to see who will lead after three rounds. So let's start with these two very strong players. The first one, Grandmaster Gukesh against Yanni Pomnishi, the very known player that played already with Magnus Carlsen on the throne and also with Dingley Ren last year. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, g3. So Gukesh is playing the Catalan, opening d5, bishop g2, and Nepomniachtchi is playing the move c5. And it's really interesting to see this move because the moves here are bishop b4, bishop e7, d takes c4. These are the most common moves in this position. Also c6, I think. But c5, if I'm not mistaken, I didn't remember such move in the theory. So in this position already Gukesh took for himself like 3 minutes to think, and he played the move c takes d5. It's really important move, I think, in such positions because, for example, if black takes with e pawn, white can play knight f3, knight c6, for example, I don't know, knight c3, and c takes d4, knight takes d4, and bishop c5, for example, and this pawn on d5 will be a very weak pawn. And you see that this knight on d4 is doing a great blockade for this pawn. So after c takes d5, Nepomniachtchi played the move knight takes d5, and it makes sense for us because we understand that he didn't want to have a so weak pawn on d5. Knight f3 by Gukesh after 7 minutes. As you might understand, in this position Gukesh didn't know, and his preparation, I'm not sure that he remembers something in this position already. C takes d4 and castle. You see, 7 minutes more for this move, castle. It makes sense because this pawn on d4 will be taken by white as soon as possible. Bishop c5, knight takes d4, like we said, castle, knight b3, bishop e7. Until now, I think it's very logical play by these two players. e4 want to just move this knight from d5 from the center, knight b4, knight c3. Also, e4 was just to have the possibility to bring the knight for to c3 square, of course. So knight 8 c6, right? Because these two knights are in b file. So knight 8 to c6 is going, and bishop e3. I think in this position, interesting move maybe was queen h5. With the idea to play rook d1, bishop b4, rook c1, rook c1, and like after g6, for example, queen h6, bishop f6, rook d1, queen e7, and something like h4, I think, maybe bishop somewhere, maybe bishop e3. I'm not sure, maybe also this move is fine. But Gukesh playing the move bishop e3. And now Yanni Pomniachtchi decided to remove the queens from the game. Rook a d1, of course, is the best move because rook f d1 will meet knight c2, rook a c1, and knight takes e3. And of course, this position is very bad for white. These two double pawns are very weak, and like two bishops for black. Endgame, good endgame. Knight will be on e5, b6, bishop a6, or bishop b7, and of course black is almost winning in this position. So after queen takes d1, rook takes rook a d1, knight d5. The idea of knight d5 is to play something like knight d3 or knight c4 or maybe knight b to d3 in some variations. So a3 was played, knight b c6, knight b c6, yeah, of course. Knight b d3 is a bad mistake because I think just f4, knight takes b2, f takes e5, knight takes d1, rook takes d1, bishop takes a3, okay, knight b5, it's very bad, right? So something like rook d8, takes, knight b5. I think that in this position there is a good possibility to win this for white, because you know, like two knights for this rook, and the rook is not doing much in this position. So knight bc6 was played by Jan, f4, knight c4, bishop c1, very logical until now, to protect this pawn on b2. f6 was played, also very logical move because white wants to push the pawn on e5 to open this diagonal for the bishop, and f6 is just a prophylactic move. Rook fe1, maybe also here there is some variations with e5. For example, if h6, I think e5 is interesting move in this position. F takes, bishop takes c6, and maybe it's not so good, right? Because rook b8, yeah, it's bad. Knight d4, yeah, knight b2, yeah. So maybe not. Maybe the idea of rook fe1 is just to play bishop f1, right? Rook b8, bishop f1, knight d6, and now knight b5. It was a good move, but I think also bishop e3 was very candidate move. You know, like bishop e3, the bishop is not need to be on c1 because the knight not on c4 to attack the b2 pawn. So the bishop not didn't need to protect this pawn on b2, and bishop e3 is like a, you know, like developing move. Maybe bishop c5, maybe knight b5, of course, but you just develop a piece. But he played the move knight b5, knight takes, bishop takes, king f7. Now bishop e3 is coming, a6, bishop e2, b5. And in this position, it seems like white has an advantage, right? Because his pieces are very good located. And the rook will come here, the knight will come here, this rook will come here, king f2. It seems that white has an advantage, and I'm not sure what black can do, right? Because in this position, for example, I think king f2 is very logical move to bring the king to the center and see what happened, because after bishop b7, for example, rook d7 might be a move, and it's not so easy for black to play to defend this position. So knight c5 was played, rook d8, take, and rook c1. Now white wants just take the pawn on a6 or pawn on e6. So bishop b6 is really a prophylactic move, of course. King f2, very logical move, and bishop takes c5. Bishop takes c5, bishop b7, and in this position, I really think that let's do evaluation of position. For example, we have two bishops for white, bishop and knight for black. The rook on c1 is good, is more than good for you know, like versus this rook on b8, and this bishop is very strong, right? And yeah, the position is open, as we can see in this position. Somewhere like bishop d1, bishop b3 can be a plan, and f5, of course, to bring the king on e3. And yeah, it seems that black suffering here. So king e3 was played and rook d8. And now I think maybe this is the moment of the game for Gukesh. This is maybe a moment that maybe could have changed the result of this game. To play the move a4. What do you think about this move? Because a4, I want to take the b5 pawn, of course. After b takes a4, I have the move rook c4. And or maybe, you know what, I thought also about something like this, bishop c4, no, but knight a5. Okay, so rook c4, and I just want to take the pawn. take the pawn, and this pawn on a6 will be very weak. And after I'm taking the pawn on a4, I have the possibility to play bishop c4 and with the idea to push f5. And this king is not safe here at all. So after rook c4, I'm not sure how can he play. For example, knight e7, I assume. Just take the pawn, I think. And bishop a6 is already a threat in this position. And it seems quite good, you know. I'm not sure why Gukesh didn't play the move a4. For example, let's see maybe b4, but now maybe bishop c4 or rook c4 maybe also makes sense, because after a5 there is a move bishop b6 and rook c5, and this pawn will be very weak. Of course, bishop b5 will come to attack this knight on c6. So I'm not sure why a4 was not played in this position, but I see that Gukesh had like 19 minutes in this position and he played very fast bishop b6. I assume he didn't want to waste a lot of time of thinking, and because don't forget, he has only 12 moves until the move 40 that he gets the increment um, in the clock. So bishop b6, rook d7, rook d1, and from this moment I'm not sure that white has some advantage. Of course, it looks like more than okay, a little bit advantage, but it's not enough to win this game. So h5 was played, b3, bishop c8, a4, e5, of course, wants to bring this bishop to e6, take, f5, king g7, take. Yeah, he didn't take, also king g6 is fine, of course, but he played the move bishop d3, bishop c2, and now bishop e6, king d2, b4, and king g6, and they agree to draw. And of course, in this position, there is no way to have advantage for white, or of course for black. So a draw is very understandable result in this game. So Gukesh against Nepomniachtchi, a draw in third round of the candidates tournament. Wow. Let's move to the game of Abasov against Hikaru Nakamura. Okay, so d4, d5, c4, c6, c takes d5. Wow. So Nakamura is playing the Slav opening, and c takes d5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. It's unbelievable that in such tournament, semi-Slav, and not semi-Slav, of course, Slav defense with white c takes d5. It's really ugly. Of course, like it's so drawish. You can't play such moves, such opening in this 10 candidate. Abasov, I must say, I respect you, of course. You're a very strong player, but I assume that you didn't want to play so much for a draw. But of course, it's your choice. Bishop f4, a6 was played, e3, bishop g4, h3, takes, e6, rook c1, bishop d6. It's just, like all the pieces will replace very soon. Bishop d3, takes, castle, rook c8, queen f3, queen d6, queen e2. Like there is no way to lose this position with white or also with black. So just need to remove all the pieces and agree to draw. So knight e2, g6, take, rook c1, and yeah, take, and the game is over. Yeah, it was very ugly game. I assume Abasov just wanted to take the draw home and will celebrate with the prize money for the draw. And Hikaru, like Hikaru wanted to do a draw after the loss in the last round to Vidit with the white pieces. So I think for Hikaru it's quite okay to draw this game and to have some peaceful energy after the loss to Vidit. I must say one thing, another thing, yeah, like in the opening, in this position, a6 is not, like is not the main line here. Bishop f5, black can play e3, e6, something like bishop b5, or maybe bishop d3, takes, bishop d6, takes, and this is a draw, of course. But in this position, instead of playing e3, there is opportunity to play this move, queen b3, knight a5, queen a5, f4 check, bishop d7, queen c2, and now rook c8, e3, e6, bishop d3, like bishop b4, it's the way to play, castle, h3, a lot of playing here like rook fc1, knight e5, queen a2, and black wants to play a6, queen e7, rook fd8, bishop e8, and it seems like okay, but the, there are a lot of games in such position, so you can check, you can see. I really recommend it for black to get some interesting variations here in these like very very um, tough variation with the white, like it's very ugly to play such opening with the white pieces because black didn't have like a plan to get some advantage, or maybe to see to get adventure in this game. So yeah, so Abasov just took the draw home. Let's see another game, more than interesting, from Agriza Firouza against Fabiano Caruana. Um, so Agriza Firouza lost his second round to, I think, Gukesh, but I'm not sure. I think Gukesh, because Vidit won against Nakamura. Prag lost to Gukesh, and Firouza lost to Nepomniachtchi, right? So Firouza lost to Nepomniachtchi, and Caruana won against Abasov. So Fabiano Caruana with the black pieces, like is okay with drawing this game. So let's see what happens. So e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Rossolimo variation, and knight f6 was played. Of course, in this position, g6 is the main line here, also e6, of course, and Caruana playing the move knight f6. Here, there are a lot of variation for white. One of them is to play bishop takes c6, d takes c6, d3, bishop g4, h3, bishop h5, castle, e6, bishop f4, knight c3. These are the variations for white here. After bishop takes c6, there is also another plan to play e5, knight d5, knight c3, knight c7, take the bishop, the knight on c6, d takes c6, and knight e4. And the main line here is, I think, knight e6, d3, g6, b3, bishop g7, bishop b2, or castle, and it's fine for black. In this position, I think also d3 is move, g6, knight e4, bishop g7. Yeah, knight c5 is not the best way to play, because b6, knight e4, and bishop g4, and black is playing very fast and good in this position, like bishop f4, knight e6. After bishop g3, like castle, and knight d4 will come, and black has the initiative in this variation. But Firouza playing the move knight c3. Knight d4 was played. Here, there are possibility to play bishop c4, maybe bishop a4, but of course e5 is the main line. Takes on b5, take on b5, knight d5, c4 is correct, knight c7, knight c3. In this position also castle, there are several options to play here. Knight takes b5, take on b5, b6, d4, and it's fine for white. Of course, it may be better. Maybe here, maybe to play d5, d4, and c4. This is what I remember. If I'm not wrong. But Alireza playing the move knight c3 after 7 minutes of thoughts. d5, e takes d6, e takes d6. En passant, of course, d4 was played by Alireza. Bishop e7, castle, castle, and bishop f4. It seems that white just putting his pieces in good situation. You know, rook e1, queen d2, rook a d1, h3 to play. It seems very logical in this position. I know, you know, I just remembered that after knight takes b5 here, in this position there is very interesting move knight g5, with the idea to play queen f3 and double attack, also on knight on d5, and also threat a checkmate on f7. And you know, it's really important to know this variation with the black pieces, because it's not so simple to defend it, right? So f6, for example, here I think knight e4 it's the main line here, but you know, I'm not sure. We need to check about it. I think we need to check knight a6. Also, there is a move queen f3, f6, queen takes d5, fg, knight c3, e6. Yeah, really interesting position. I remember something interesting here. Give me one moment to think how it was. Oh, you know, like how it was. Maybe something like f6, c4, for example. No, c4. How it was? Maybe like queen h5, g6, and e takes f6. You see, after g takes h5, it's a checkmate with the pawn. So knight takes f6 and queen e2. And it's also interesting position to play with white. I think black should be okay after e6, bishop e7, and castle. But it's also might be interesting after h4, for example, and h5, and white is attacking here. So let's see what was in the game. c4, knight c7, yeah, knight c3, takes, take, d4, bishop, and bishop f4. So knight e6 was played, bishop e3. I think bishop g3 also makes sense, a lot of sense, because this pawn on d6 is weak. And for example, f5, d takes c5, f4, c takes d6, bishop f6, bishop h4. And you know, in this position, bishop h4 is not working because of d7. And after bishop takes knight takes h4, and the bishop is under attack here. But now g5 maybe interesting move. Rook e1, g takes h5, h4, queen d5. Really tense position. King h8, rook a d1, I think d7. Really interesting position to play with the white pieces. I think bishop g3, you know, like makes sense in this position. For example, bishop f6, d5, knight d4 take. You know, like bishop takes queen d2. The next move will be knight b5 or knight e4, because this pawn on d6 is very weak. And you know, like to continue to press on it makes sense for me. But bishop e3 was played because also the d4 square is interesting and important for white. So knight c7 was played. Very, you know, like very unusual move. Black wants just to develop his bishop to f5 or g4, and because of this, white is playing h3, bishop f5, like we said, rook e1, very makes sense, just to develop the rook to the e file, rook e8, queen d2, and d5. I think in this position, maybe interesting move to play was d takes c5, d takes c5 and queen b3, with the idea of threatening this pawn on b7. For example, the next move will be rook a d1, maybe knight d5, maybe bishop f4, and it seems that white is pressing. Is pressing in this position, but yeah, of course, it's not so easy to play with black. For example, queen c8, rook a d1, and I'm not sure how black is playing and what is his plan to defend this position. But queen d2 was played, and d5 is just crushing the center. C takes d5, c4 wants to take this pawn, like in a calm variation. Bishop f4, knight takes d5, rook e5, knight takes c3, queen takes c3. For example, after rook takes f5, knight d5 will be very strong piece, and blockade this pawn on d4. So of course queen takes c3 is the best move, queen d7, white took the pawn on c4, but as you see the position is open and black has these two bishops, and the initiative for this pawn of course are very strong, and I must say that it seems like black doesn't have much to worry. So, oh, what I'm doing? Let's go back. Let's go back. So, rook ac8 was played after queen takes c4, queen b5, take the queen, and bishop e4. You see, the bishop here is very strong. Bishop f6 will come. Rook c2, maybe take, and rook f e2, e2. And it seems that black is doing fine. d5, a6, take on b7, take on d5, bishop e6, rook a7, rook a8, take, a3, h6, rook e1, rook d8, bishop e5, and it seems that both of them wanted a draw, and this is how the game was finished. So these two bishops are quite strong in this open position, and black doesn't need to worry. Of course, if these bishops were removed from the board, white has a lot of chances to win this position, but with these two bishops are quite strong. So this result are very understandable for these two players. Alireza is coming for a draw after lost to Jan, and Fabiano is drawing with the black pieces after win Abasov with the white pieces. So let's go to the last game, the last but not least game of Vidit against Praggnanandhaa. And as you probably remember, Praggnanandhaa lost his second game against Gukesh, and Vidit won his game against Nakamura with the black pieces. So Prag needs to win it, and let's see what happened. So e4, e5, knight e3, knight e6, bishop b5, our Spanish Rui Lopez, and a6, bishop a4, and now Prag came with a very interesting preparation for this game. f5 was played, and Gukesh already finished his game. So Vidit playing the move d4 after thought about like 5 minutes. So d4 was played, the best move in the position. E takes d4, e5 also the best move, b5, bishop b3, and knight a5. And in this position, after the game, I started to look on this position, and I think that the best move in this position is to play queen takes d4. I think it's also a little bit more logical. Just to develop the queen, the next moves will be, of course, castle, bishop g5, knight c3, bishop d5, rook f e1, rook a d1, and white seems very strong. In this position, for example, knight takes b3, a takes b3, bishop e7, knight c3, just developing the pieces, knight e7, castle, knight g6 for example, or knight c6 maybe, but just to play like queen f4. And it seems that black's kings is really in danger in the next future, and he didn't castle yet, so it's not easy to defend this. For example, here maybe bishop b7, it's also a move, and because after c5 just queen d5 and the game is over, because queen takes a8 and queen f7, and these are the threats. And also in this position maybe bishop f7 immediately is just winning the game on a spot. Queen d5, king e8, and queen takes a8, and the game is over. So bishop b7 might be a move, but now we're not playing the move knight c3 because of the move c5, and now we don't have this trick queen d5. We need to play the move bishop d5. And now, for example, knight c6, queen d2, and like castle, knight c3, b3, bishop b2, rook d1, rook f1, and this very, very strong bishop on d5 will do a lot of bad life, hard life for black. So Vidit took after 18 minutes with the knight on d4. Bishop b7 was played by Prag very, very fast. Knight takes f5, knight takes b3. It seems that Prag didn't know the move knight takes f5 and thought like 9 minutes about knight takes b3, take, and d6 was played. Queen e2, queen d7. It's very interesting move, right? Because after e takes d6, it's discovering check, but king f7, and also the threat are to take this knight on f5. Another one is to play rook e8. Another one is bishop takes d6. So, for example, knight e3, bishop d6. The next moves will be knight f6, rook e8, rook f8, and king g8, and it's really, really nice to have for black. Very, very strong bishops here, and I really wanted to say that black is just better in this position. After queen e2 was played queen d7, and Vidit played the move e6. In this position also knight d4 was one of the moves. D takes e5, queen maybe h5 check before, but I'm not sure. King d8 maybe, I don't know. Like maybe king e7, queen takes e5, and king f7, and of course, like we saw, knight f6, bishop d6, and like this, and the king is totally fine for black. And so e6 was played by Vidit. Prag is playing queen c6 without any fear in his eyes. Bishop g5 was played, also very natural move. Wants to play the move e7, and the king, of course, is very weak and open. e6 was played by black. For example, e7 is not working because of g takes f5, take on f8, king takes f8, and rook e8 is coming, queen g2 is coming, and the king is totally fine here on f8. So e6, queen c6, bishop g5, g6 was played. Yeah, knight e3, h6. Just want to push this bishop from g5 from this diagonal. So bishop f4, knight e7. Very logical, I think. Prag is playing very good chess. Wants to bring this bishop here, maybe castle long side, and maybe the short side. So c4 was played by Vidit, wants to bring the knight to c3 and on d5, but b4, very strong move, I think, by Prag, our Prag. He didn't want to bring this knight on c3. It's a prophylactic and very smart move. Queen g4 was played. I thought in this position to play something like rook a5. Like it's really complicated, like move, because you want to put the knight on d5, but unfortunately rook a5, it's very nice move, but it's just losing the game after queen e4, and it's a double attack, and the game is just over. So queen g4 was played. Also knight d2 seems to be okay for white. Bishop g7, castle, and somehow to bring the knight to the game. I'm not sure how and where, but something like f3, knight e4 maybe should be fine. Queen g4 was played. Queen c5. This is very, very important move, I think, by black. For example, bishop g7 And the main idea after bishop g7 that white has the move knight d5, and so queen g4, the threat is knight d5, and after knight d5, of course, queen g6 is coming, and the king is very, very weak in the center. So queen c5 is, one more time, prophylactic move. I think in these kind of games you can see a lot of prophylactic move. I really can like suggest you to have any game that you are playing, every move that your opponent is playing, take one minute to think what is threatening, right? This is very important to understand. So here Praggnanandhaa, of course, thought like 11 minutes in this position and realized that 95, it's a threat, it's a very, very, very big threat, and should understand it. So queen c5 also, after 95, bishop takes d5 is just totally fine for black, and also avoiding this rook a5 from white. So queen g4 was played, queen c5, like we saw now, castle, bishop g7, knight d2, and castle long. I think in this position maybe castle in the short side was a little bit better, because after castle long, knight d5 was a move, and of course after knight takes d5, e7 check, rook d7, there is a very interesting line here. C takes d5, queen takes d5, and knight c4. And the main idea that white wants to put rook e1, queen g6 maybe, rook c1, maybe knight c6, d6, sorry, in some variation. So it's not so easy to understand how black is playing in this position. But let's see. Vidit played the move h4. I think he thought like Prag wants to play the move g5, and after bishop g3, h5 and h4. Of course, in this position, g5 was not good because queen h5 check. But now, after castle long, g5 and h5 it's a threat. But knight d5 is just solving this threat, because after g5, bishop e3, right? And of course, bishop takes d5, for example, c takes d5, and like it's winning position because rook fc1 here, queen e2. But for instance, like g5, bishop e3, and this square is here. So h4 was played, rook de8, of course, rook a d1, bishop takes b2, just take the pawn, black is totally fine, knight d5, take, bishop takes d5, e7, king b8, bishop e3, makes sense, king b5, just protect this pawn on b4, knight c4, bishop c3, bishop d4. And now Prag is playing the move rook h8, and I'm not sure about this move. I think rook h7 was more than fine here, because after rook h7 you want to double your rook on e5, and it seems much stronger. I'm not sure why he didn't play it, but for example, queen g6, rook takes e7, and like these two rooks are monsters here, and I'm not sure why Prag didn't play it. But rook h8 also makes sense. He wants to defend the pawn on g6. Bishop takes c3, take, and queen d4 also makes sense, because he wants to take this bishop and also the pawn on c3. Bishop b7, queen c3, and rook takes e7. Knight a5, rook e5. Of course, in this position, black is a little bit better. b4, and black started to push the pawn. h5, g4, g3, and the game is just over. You see, the king on f2 is very, very weak. Rook e5 is just losing for queen g2, king e1, and just rook f8, rook e2, rook f1, king d2, and queen d5, and the game is over. So queen f3 was played by Vidit with below 1 minute in this position. He has only 1 minute to play 4 moves, so it's not so simple, and of course in this position is just terrible. Rook g5 makes sense, want to take the g2 pawn. Queen takes, king takes, g4, just take the pawn and taking this pawn. And here he just wanted to remove one rook from the field, and of course it's a winning position. So after rook f5, the continuation will be king to g2 and rook g5, and of course the game is over. For example, take king f4 and just rook b5, rook d4 and rook e5. You can do king b7, king b6, king b5, and 3 pawns against 1 pawn. Of course it's a winning, absolutely. So Prague, welcome to candidate tournament, and thank you very much, because we are, like, we're a fan of you, Prague. So let's go Prague, and let's go Prague. And yeah, you must continue to play such games. You play with the black pieces. You won your countryman Vidit, and it's very good for you to achieve this win. Like in the beginning of the tournament, because it's really important for the confidence. And look forward to the next game of you, Prague. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. I really want to welcome you. Please go to my website and to my YouTube channel and subscribe and like all the videos. Of course, you can comment here and feel free to ask questions and to say your thoughts about the videos. And thank you. It was my pleasure to be with you here in round 3, FIDE Candidates Tournament 2024, and look forward for the next videos. So thank you very much, guys, and bye bye.